Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade, and on this episode of Faith in Politics, we're going to be reaching across the nation to Florida and talking to John Stemberger on what's happening in the great state of Florida. And of course, as always, the world according to Jim. So let's chat about that. I remember watching Gilligan's Island every day after school, and this is in and among my experience of checkers and pogo. You people from Hawaii know what I'm talking about. In Hawaii, these were the simple days of kikaida, Kamen Rider, and Rainbow Man. As kids, we ate this up because the shows contained heroes and villains, and the heroes always won. My dad used to get so frustrated with us because we spent too much time watching television. How can you refuse those Saturday morning cartoons, innocent cartoons that create humor between the strife of a cat and a dog? Or cartoons revolving around the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds. And yes, one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch, girl. And classics like Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig. I acknowledge that some of these cartoons were also full of violence, and shows of the day like The Brady Bunch, My Three Sons, The Courtship of Eddie's Father, Family Affair, and The Partridge Family highlighted divorce, death, and mixed families. But it shows that my generation was not immune to war, chaos, and uncertainty. In fact, my younger years witnessed drug use like pakalolo, otherwise known as marijuana, and the end to the Vietnam War. In fact, in 1973, and then again in 1979, I remember my mother stressing while we waited in line to get gas because of the gas rationing. And on January 20th, 1981, I rejoiced when the hostages in Iran were released and the newly elected President Ronald Reagan celebrated that victory. My thoughts this week has been on the generation coming up and what they will remember. Every generation has seen and experienced things that become innate to who we are as a nation. Stress and anxiety cause strife and anger. It comes from within to destroy. It's the bad apple that spoils the whole bunch. If we base it on today's programming and what's being taught in schools, we have every right to be worried, and many parents are. James 4:1, what is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? I think there's a responsibility that comes with the rights of our citizenship. That responsibility demands that we pay attention to the bad apples. I wouldn't bake a pie with a bad apple, and neither would you. It's time to stop the hate and reciting the rhetoric that destroys rather than builds. No matter how much strife was loaded in these cartoons I referred to, there was always peace at the end because the heroes won. But that means standing up to the bullies and remaining fearless in the face of uncertainty. And that's my thoughts for the week. Aloha and welcome to Faith in Politics. I'm Eva Andrade, your host, and I'm here with Jim Hochberg, and we are reaching across the great states to get to Florida because we want to introduce John Stemberger, is my counterpart there in Florida. He is the president of the Florida Family Policy Council and also their legal counsel. So we want to welcome you to the show today, John.
Eva, great to be with you. I miss your state. I've visited there twice with my family, and it's so beautiful. Hope to be back sometime soon.
We had some good Hawaiian food together.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Now, John, what's interesting, the reason we had to have you on the show is because your great governor keeps coming up in every single conversation that Jim and I have. As you know, we're a very blue state here. And our chances of getting a governor like DeSantis would probably be, I don't know, Jim, what would you say our odds are, Jim, even though you're not a betting man?
Slim to none.
Slim to none. All right. So we want to tap into you and just kind of find out what's happening in that great state of Florida. And let's start with this. Florida was the very first state after the election that was able to get through all the craziness of the election with all the people you have there. There were no problems with your election, and everybody looked to Florida and say, good job, Florida. And I know that you had a lot to do with what was happening in the education when it came to the election. So you want to share why Florida did such a great job?
Well, we also have had a long history of, if you recall, hanging chads and, Jewish ladies in Palm Beach who Democrats that claimed that they voted for Pat Buchanan inaccurately and crazy stuff like that over the years. So I think that a lot of this is attributed to our governor's leadership. One of the first things he did was to fire two supervisor of elections in South Florida that were just had decades of mismanagement. And he's just kind of a no-nonsense sheriff that's in town. So that sent a signal to everyone that we're not going to put up with this anymore. And so, as you know, the supervisor elections are independent county constitutional officers, but they can be fired unilaterally by the governor for mismanagement or malfeasance. And so I think that everybody realized we need to get our act together. And so the election was clean. Everybody expected Florida to be the one straggling along, but by God's grace, we actually were one of the cleanest in the country.
So what that actually brings up to me is for people in general to realize that elections are a lot more than just casting a ballot. We need to really be involved to make sure that they're fair and accurate too.
That's right. And it's difficult because not only do you have, you have the fact that these are primarily state issues, you have state law, but then you have individual counties that have these supervisor elections. And really, they're kind of the guardians of democracy. These are very important positions because if they can't get it right at a micro level in a local election, that affects everybody's ability. The other beauty of the thing is it also prevents fraud because if you had one national election where one person was controlling or one agency was controlling, you had much more opportunity for fraud. It's more difficult when you have literally thousands of counties because you have more accountability and more decentralization. If somebody is going to cheat, they're only cheating in that one county or doing something wrong in that one county. It's not spreading to the entire state. So the beauty of our system, the way we have it, is quite ingenious. And it's one of the reasons that federalism is a good thing.
I agree.
And we have a lot of people that are moving to Florida. It seems like, a lot of people like what's happening over there. And I think when we look at how great DeSantis handled everything from the elections moving forward, there's a lot of great things happening right there in the state of Florida. Would you like to share with us some of your victories?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we managed by God's grace. We are not a Republican state. We have a lot of NPAs, but we've managed to have a Republican legislature. The House is more conservative than the Senate, and we have a cabinet that is, with the exception of there's 5 members and 1 member is a Democrat, only statewide Democrat office holder. But because of that, we're able to pass some legislation that's exciting. We did a women's sports bill requiring women to only compete against women and prohibiting transgender women who are actually men with gender dysphoria from competing. We had a moment of silence, a mandatory moment of silence for 1 minute. This is actually sounds simple, but to me, it's a big deal in a world where their minds and hearts are constantly invaded with music and games and just activity. To require them to be silent for 1 minute, that's a big deal in terms of contemplation of who they are as a person before God and before their own conscience. It's just a very powerful moment, I think. And have that happen every day in public schools is a big deal. That bill was just signed into law last week. We had a parental consent bill passed, which we've been working on for 30 years here in Florida, actually, requiring a minor to get parental consent before that minor can undergo the irreversible surgery that is abortion and the ugly procedure that is abortion.
Congratulations.
So we had some great, sorry?
Congratulations.
Thank you. So we did have some really good laws that were able to be passed this past session.
Now, one of the things that when I was looking at your website, I saw that Governor DeSantis had addressed your 8th annual legislative prayer breakfast. And one of the quotes in your press release, it's something that's going to speak very near and dear to Jim's heart. Jim is an attorney as well as you are, and you both have fought long and hard for religious freedom in this great nation of ours. And this was the quote, and I just want to share it with you and get your thoughts on this. And Jim, I'd like to get yours as well. He said, and I quote, "Throughout this whole time period," now we're talking about the COVID-19 lockdown, "throughout this whole time period, this state has done much better than a lot of these other states, and part of it because we've respected people's freedoms and liberties. These don't get suspended just because there's a pathogen." And I know that there's been a lot of talk on a lot of states. Now, Hawaii, we still are in a lockdown. A lot of our restrictions have been loosened up, but I know that there's a lot of people that are still unhappy with everything that's happening with the COVID vaccination and the forcing and whether it's going to be mandated, not mandated, the travel. Travel in Florida is just like Hawaii. I mean, Jim, actually, you want to share some of the stuff that you've been dealing with, Jim, because people, when they come to Hawaii, they have to come over a sea, right? So, I mean, getting here, we're a little different than where you can drive from state to state.
So what she's talking about is Harmeet Dillon and I from the Center for American Liberty filed a federal court lawsuit last June because before there were any PCR testing opportunities, everybody that traveled to Hawaii, every single person coming off the airplane had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. And they weren't individualized review. It was just everybody's quarantined. So we filed a federal court case, and our judge was unfortunately a original Obama nominee. And she took John Roberts' position in the first run of South Bay Pentecostal, that federal judges ought not to get involved in the COVID stuff, let the local elected officials do it, which was really very disappointing. So she dismissed our case, and at the time we didn't expect COVID was still going to be restricting things a year and a half later, or a year later. So we may have had a different response to appealing if we had any idea it was still going to be going on this long. But that's what she's talking about. And Harmeet and I were really disappointed in the judge at the time.
Well, it's
so governments do have broad powers in times of emergency, and that's in the common law. But at the same time, an emergency can't be 2 years, right? An emergency is an emergency. You evaluate, you figure out what's going on, and then you have to say, okay, the Constitution still applies just because we have a disease pathogen in the air. And I think that this whole thing goes to the visceral response of the type of philosophy of government, a person's worldview. Who are we trusting? Are we trusting in God? Are we trusting in the judgment of individual citizens? Or are we trusting in the government to tell us what to do and to how to be safest, right? And to kind of Mr. Big brother looking over your shoulder, trying to protect you instead of allowing you to take risks for yourself as an individual based upon the science that you understand and based upon your doctor's recommendations.
Well, and in Hawaii at the time, last June, we didn't have very many COVID cases. We didn't have hardly any deaths. The governor actually made his emergency proclamation before we had a single case, based on worldwide statistical whatever. And in our case, the state's epidemiologist actually urged the judge to follow Roberts, not because of the statistics in Hawaii, but because of the statistics outside of Hawaii. It was really bad.
Well, it's interesting because when you look at what's happening across the nation, like in Florida, right? You guys lessened your restrictions a long time ago, and we didn't see the rise in cases there in Florida the way that Hawaii was getting us worried, right? That there was just going to be this massive outbreak. John, we just kind of tapped into some of the stuff we want to talk to you about. We have to jump into a break already. So we just want to have you hang on. And if you're willing, we'll come back and jump back into the great state of Florida and why Hawaii can't be more like Florida. We'll be right back.
Aloha. Are you a Christ follower looking to create content with a difference? Join the ministry team at Kalo TV for a life of adventure. Imagine accomplishing great things that shape our culture. Could that be you? We are looking for creatives that are passionate about video projects from concept to delivery. Are you excited about editing, lighting, camera work, and all this to spread the gospel in creative, relevant, and unique ways? Regardless of your level of experience, contact us and let's see what the future holds. Go to kalotv.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
We have a mission here at Kalo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs
we're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my God.
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The Kalo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Kalo TV aims to bring much-needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. Jim Hochberg and I, your host, Eva Andrade. We're here with John Stemberger from the Florida Family Policy Council. And we want to jump right into all the great things that are happening in Florida. And I want to give John a little bit more time to share his wisdom of what's happening over there. And let's talk about something that just happened recently. So Governor DeSantis just signed a bill that would take care of the craziness that's happening with communism. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so what we did is he basically mandated a couple things. He mandated that we would not be teaching critical race theory. He led that effort and the Board of Education passed it. That they would be teaching history objectively, not subjectively, that they would be looking at the facts and not theory, that they would teach history, including the Holocaust, which many people are now seeing in a different light because of prejudice toward the Jewish faith. But they did that, but they also talked about banning communism, making it clear that this is a bad ideology, right? And so, because what's happening is the teachers are basically running to the left and teaching the socialism is good, the distribution of wealth is good, control by the government, ownership by the government is good, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was really a bold move, but I think it's one that's great and needs to take place in other states as well.
That's really good. I mean, again, we can't say enough how much we'd love to have your governor here in the state of Hawaii. So, John, there's some other great things that are happening. You talked a little bit about the protecting women in sports. Gambling has been a big issue there for you in Florida. We keep holding gambling back every year. So tell us what's happening on the gambling front.
Well, unfortunately, our entire Republican leadership led an expansion of casino gambling. So we do have our issues in Florida as well as victories. And we opposed it. We ran a statewide campaign. We brought 250 people to Tallahassee. We bussed them from Miami, Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa, and just put up a force and just said, we're not going to do this. The one thing we did kill was called slots for tots, and that was basically putting slot machines on your cell phone so that in smartphones anywhere in Florida they could actually play slot machines, which are the crack cocaine of gambling. We were able to kill that. What the big expansion was basically sports betting. And that is in all the pari-mutuel wagering facilities, instead of dog racing or horse racing or highlight, you're going to now have large screens where people are going to be betting on the nuances of the strikes, the balls, the touchdowns. I mean, literally even small things in a game can be bet on by all the people watching throughout the state. And so that's their way to hook the new generation, the younger generation, into gaming and gambling and try to get them to see it in a new light.
Now, what's the pulse of the people there in Florida when it comes to the issue of gambling? I mean, have you guys, the Florida Family Policy Council, done any statistics or polls?
Well, we passed a constitutional amendment requiring 60% approval of the people before any expansion of casino gambling as defined by the federal statute of which games are considered casino-type games. We believe this sports betting is going to be appealed because we do believe that it falls comfortably within the concept of casino gambling as it's defined by federal law. And so it's possible the Florida Supreme Court could strike this down completely. But so we know that at least the people want to control it. They don't want the government to do this. And we think that the legislature just ignored that amendment, and we'll have to see if the courts are going to strike it down in light of the will of the people.
I know.
One thing I'm actually super impressed with from your governor is his willingness to assist other states with their border issues with Mexico. That is just unbelievably fabulous.
I mean, this shows the kind of chutzpah he has. I'm just so impressed. It's almost unprecedented, but we're living in unprecedented times, and we need unprecedented leadership, and he's giving us that. He's looking into the future. He's solving problems before they get here. People say, well, where's the transgender athletes in Florida? It's, well, you don't sit around as a leader and wait for the problem to come to your state. Leaders look into the future. They solve problems before they get there, and that's what he's doing. And it's really causing a lot of people on the left angst, but it's really what leadership is. And so, yeah, he's actually sending people to the border in Texas and in Arizona and in places that have asked for help, try to control the border. It's wide open. The Biden administration has done absolutely nothing. And it's really very disturbing to see what's happening, especially after Trump had real control over the situation.
Do you have a personal relationship with Governor DeSantis?
So I had dinner with him and his wife a couple of years back when he was going to run for the U.S. Senate seat. His wife is just as smart, just as conservative, and just as Christian as he is, which is very nice. You know, for years we had presidents with supposedly Republican presidents with wives that went south on some of our core social issues, but she is rock solid. And so, I mean, we don't hang out together, but he knows who I am. We've had a relationship. We work together. Our board interviewed him privately in the primary, and we interviewed him publicly with Frank Luntz in our dinner with him and the other Republican candidate that was running at the time. So clearly, we do have a relationship, and it's a stronger one now than it's ever been.
Now, you have both a C3 and a C4. Your C4 is Florida Family Action. Yeah, so I like to, as Jim and I, when we talk to the people here in Hawaii, we have to keep reminding them that there is a difference between what you can do as a C3 and what you can do as a C4. So, if you endorse, you would do it through your C4 organization, correct? And I know Jim has a lot of thoughts and feelings about that. In fact, Jim, I could see you bristling when he was talking about getting a constitutional amendment, because I don't know, getting something like that here in Hawaii requires a lot of pulling of teeth.
I actually have a project I'm working on separately from this, which is to amend our Constitution to require that the legislature get involved in emergency power exercise after 60 days. But we're going to use it for candidates running in next year's election, saying this is the language we'll support, elect us, and we'll put that in place because people are very upset with the way the emergency powers have been used here. So I don't know if this thing's going to work or not, but that's one of the things we're working on.
Sounds like a great idea.
It is, and it's a lot of work. I mean, Jim and I have been around for 20 years plus doing public policy here in the state. We don't plan on going anywhere. But because Jim brought up elections, let's talk about, what do you think the future is going to be for Governor DeSantis? He's getting a lot of attention across the nation. People are looking, he shows a lot of strong leadership skills that people really need in a time like this. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
It's really remarkable how people all over the country are calling me, telling me how great he is, and just reading it. And they're watching what's happening. I do think that he could be the next president of the United States. Certainly he could be the nominee. I predict that Trump will not run again, even though he's saying he will run again, just because I think that the risk is too high that he would lose. No one wants him to lose. Above all, we probably don't want him to lose more than he doesn't want to lose. So I think in the end, in the final analysis, he will not run. And if that's the case, that will clear the way for a guy like DeSantis to run, and I think could very easily take the Republican nomination, barring some radical circumstance that happens between now and then, which you never know in politics, things do happen.
But what I think people like, what I like about Governor DeSantis is just the complete opposite of what you see out of Chuck Schumer. What your governor says is what he really believes. He doesn't pander. He doesn't make stuff up like this week. All the Democrats are saying, we were never opposed to voter ID. I mean, people can see that. They're lying. And I think they're going to really appreciate the forthright honesty that your governor has.
Well, one of the things, Trump was a president that gave us a bucket of good stuff and a bucket of bad stuff. Let's be honest, right? But one of the good things he did is he taught Republicans to grow a spine.
Yeah.
You can take a hit, guys, and you're not going to have to cry in the corner for 5 hours. You can push back on the media. You can push back on these institutions and these corporations, and you don't have to act like, oh, it's the end of my career because I oppose some crazy liberal thing. And I think that's what we get in DeSantis. You get all the courage, the conviction, and the character of Trump without the bad tweet aftertaste, right? He's collegial, he's respectful, he's punching, but he's punching in a way that's not below the belt. He's doing it the right way. And I think people around the country and around the world are watching that, and they're saying that and say, yeah, this is what we need.
That you bring up a good point, and as we close out this segment, I'm just curious. So, what's it like to have President Donald J. Trump living in your backyard?
Well, he lives in Palm Beach, which is in South Florida, which is almost a different country than the rest of the state. But he's doing a rally here in Tampa just in a couple of days, and he's more accessible, and of course he's not running around as he normally is, but it is unique to have him here in the state of Florida, where he now is his home. So,
but you've actually traveled in some of his circles, right? I mean, he's not a stranger to you.
You talking about Trump?
Yes.
No, I have not. He probably knows who I am, maybe, but we don't have a relationship necessarily.
I don't know. I think your reputation precedes you, my friend. No, that's good. All right. So what's new and what's going to be on the docket for the Florida Family Policy Council? What's your big challenge coming up?
Well, good question. So we have 5 strategic priorities: reaching young people, reaching blacks and Latinos, reaching pastors, promoting a Christian worldview, and then trying to do what we do on a state level, trying to create conclaves to do that on a local level, where people are monitoring their city, county councils, their school boards. And so those are our 5 strategic priorities, and we're drilling down into all of them. We just did a Latino pastors conference in Miami. We're doing a Black content of character pastors conference in the fall. And we're trying to, again, strategically reach young people. We have a great scholarship fund where we send young people to Summit and Patriot Academy and different worldview training programs. So we're just concentrating on those 5 areas right now and trying to advance the ball on the long run to see more cultural change in the state.
Well, since we have been blessed by your time, and you know that we're such a blue state here in Hawaii, why don't we leave this last minute to give some advice to people in Hawaii that really want to make a difference?
That's a great question, Eva. And here's what I would say. I would say 2 things. Number one, I do a commencement address for graduating students. And one of the addresses that I give, that I open it and end with this question: when the time comes, are you willing to stand alone? Mm-hmm. When the time comes, are you willing to stand alone? And we have to have that kind of mentality that the framers had, that those men and women that signed and really created our country to begin with, the Black Robe Regiment. We need to be willing to sacrifice and stand alone. Now, when you stand alone, the beauty of that is people see your leadership and they begin to follow you, and you're instantly not alone. So it's kind of the paradox of leadership, but we need to be willing to stand alone, because I know it can feel very lonely in Hawaii because conservatives, pro-lifers are a very small minority, but you have to be willing to stand alone and take the heat. Secondly, we just have to be faithful, right? Mother Teresa said this: it's not our job to be successful. We want to win, right? We go in with the resources, we go in with passion, but the issue is we have to say, in the end game, we do our best and the rest is up to God. Our job is just to be faithful. The results of history are in God's hands. And so that's what I would say as an encouragement in a very difficult venue where you have difficult politics.
Well, we thank you for your time, John Stemberger from the Florida Family Policy Council. And we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to launch into the world according to Jim. We'll be right back.
Aloha.
Aloha.
I have my beautiful wife with me, Sharon. Yeah, it's so good to be with everybody here. And of course, we have Pastor Tony Evans and Priscilla Shire with us. Did you see a star in the making when she was a little kid?
She was like this as a little girl.
Running around?
Yeah, running around. Yeah, she always was an actress kind of personality. She liked to get attention and give attention.
Oh,
And she was always putting on a show of some kind. Yeah, and then she would walk around. She'd take a brush.
Okay, this is
and walk around the house performing. There's a crisis need for men to man up, to be what we call kingdom men, and to rise up to the responsibility that God calls us to.
So, hey, I'm going to ask you right now. I wasn't planning on this. I'm sorry, producer Malala, but you got to come back and do a men's conference.
Hey, look, all you got to do is invite me.
Okay.
That's all you got to do is invite me.
We're done. We're doing it. Okay, that's the end, everybody. Oh, no, we'll keep going. Okay, sorry.
It's no secret that Kalo TV is the only local Christian TV station reaching the islands of Hawaii with 24/7 Christ-centered content. Just how important is Kalo TV to our culture?
Think about it. This year has been unprecedented. The pandemic lockdown, churches closed, religious freedom, a nation divided, cultural unrest. If there's ever a time that we need Christ-centered content, it is now.
Our community is struggling. Depression, suicide, unemployment, lack of purpose. Many of us are without hope. In fact, some of us are considered non-essential.
Non-essential? That's absurd. In fact, there's never been a more crucial time that the church is essential. We have the hope of Christ, the answer for our time.
And Kalo TV is committed to broadcasting the good news across Hawaii.
And that's why we're reaching out even more to those in need of God's love. Here's how.
We're starting a new initiative called Kalo Outreach, where we're going into our local communities and becoming the hands and feet of Christ.
We continue to create new and original programs that will reach every generation with the hope of Jesus.
We are adding new local and international programs to Kalo TV. After all, it is our intention to be a bright light to Hawaii and beyond.
Look, it hasn't been easy for any of us. In fact, if you need prayer, we are here for you.
And if you need encouragement, please tune in, whether it's on air, online, or on social platforms. Our vision is to provide uplifting content.
Would you join us as we broadcast the good news? This is our opportunity to come together as a community.
Right now is a pivotal time to invest in Hawaii. First and foremost, let's pray together for Hawaii. And for those who are able to, here are some ways that you can give.
As sure as we are that the sun will set tonight and rise again tomorrow morning, so is our hope in Christ.
Kalo TV, the Aloha Station, broadcasting Aloha 24/7.
To faith and politics. So people think we should get rid of the Electoral College. And on June 17th, 2021, the United States Supreme Court showed us exactly why we should not do that. And that had to do with the free exercise of religion and a sea change in the Fulton versus Philadelphia case. And that's what I want to talk about, Eva. So historically, the beginning of the free exercise clause, of course, was explained by Thomas Jefferson in his 1803 letter to the Danbury, Connecticut Baptist Convention, where they were asking him, as they were not the favored religion, because back at the founding, each state had a state religion, just like in Europe, the countries had, and they actually mostly still do have state religions and kind of denominations, not just Islam versus Christianity, but Catholicism, Calvinism,
like Maryland,
whatever.
right? Was a Catholic area.
So in Connecticut, Baptist faith was not the state-favored religion. And when they saw the First Amendment, the free exercise, and the non-establishment, they wrote Thomas Jefferson a letter saying, you know, what does this First Amendment mean with respect to our rights as a minority religion? And that's where that phrase, the Constitution, the First Amendment, erects a wall of separation between church and state to protect the church from the state, right? Okay, that's how it started. Then free exercise litigation and jurisprudence kind of came alive in 79, when there was a federal anti-bigamy statute, and the bigamists in Utah challenged it on religious freedom grounds, on free exercise, because part of their religion was to have more than one wife, and they challenged it and they lost. And it was interesting because the court said, although the free exercise clause forbids government from regulating belief, it does allow government to punish activity judged to be criminal, regardless of the activity's basis in religious beliefs. So that's where the first little slice against Thomas Jefferson's view of this wall of separation happened. And then in 1940, there was another case, and it involved the government deciding which religious charities were allowed to fundraise. And the Supreme Court unanimously said that's not acceptable. The state cannot be determining validity of religious beliefs. And it went on and on. There were some interesting things. After the Mormons in the 1800s, then the Jehovah's Witnesses had a case, and Jewish faith had a couple of cases, and it's kind of the history of religious freedom and the free exercise clause was the cases that got to the Supreme Court involved minority religions. And then in 1990, there was a sea change, and that was that Oregon versus Smith case that Justice Scalia wrote the opinion on, where he totally changed jurisprudence of free exercise to, if the law that the religious person claims is substantially burdening exercise of their religion. That's the test. Is it a substantial burden? That's the first question. If that law is a neutral law, it's not focused on attacking religious belief, it's just a law that applies to everybody, and it's generally applicable to everybody in that neutral way, but it happens to substantially burden exercise of religion, it's constitutional. From 1990, that Smith case resulted in Congress passing statutes, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the Religious Land Use in Incarcerated Persons Act, to try to put the old standard back in federal claims. Well, what happened last week is Catholic Social Services sued the city of Philadelphia a couple of years ago because, and this is really the sad thing about the case, is the actual story. So in Philadelphia, for 200 years, the Catholic Church has been taking care of children that need family life. Originally, it was asylums, and then they got changed into orphanages, and then that got changed into foster care. But the diocese in Philadelphia for the entire whole 2-year period has been doing this. And so the regime with the city of Philadelphia, they license people to certify foster eligible families to take these kids. And one of the agencies that licensed with the city of Philadelphia is Catholic Social Services. And Catholic Social Services views marriage as a sacrament between one man and one woman, and therefore they would not certify any unmarried couples. They would certify married couples and single people, including if you were a single person that was gay, lesbian, or whatever, they would have certified you too, but they'd never been asked. But that their standard was unmarried couples couldn't be certified because marriage is a substantial thing in the Catholic faith. So a newspaper story got published in 2018 explaining that the city was unable to give gay parents foster kids because the Catholic diocese wouldn't certify gay parents, which was totally untrue because the city had 20-something agencies that they contracted with, and all the rest of them were doing fine with gay parents. But because the article got written, people got upset, an investigation was had, and as a result of the investigation, the city of Philadelphia decided they couldn't allow Catholic Social Services to be a certifying agency anymore unless they changed their view on gay parents. So litigation happened. Well, what the Supreme Court did on June 17th, 9-0, is ruled that the city of Philadelphia is not permitted under the Constitution free exercise clause to make Catholic Social Services believe something contrary in order to get this benefit of participating in the foster care system. But what was more exciting than that is all 9 justices didn't sign the same opinion. The majority opinion, which is 5 out of 9, although I think it was 5-4, I think. Anyway, there were 2 concurring opinions and 1 dissenting opinion. But between the people who signed on to Justice Amy Coney Barrett's concurring opinion, which means she agreed in the result, but she wanted to get rid of the Smith from 1990 change in how free exercise law was interpreted and ruled on. And she had Kavanaugh and Justice Thomas with her, or she had Alito. No, she had Kavanaugh and Breyer with her. Alito said, but what she said is, but I don't know what to put in its place. So I'm not voting to overrule it now. We got to figure out what the replacement is. But Alito had Justice Thomas and Kavanaugh. I forget one of them. Anyway, so there's 6 of the justices currently are willing to replace the Smith thing if they have something they can agree on as a new test. And that is why we don't want to get rid of the Electoral College. The judges that are on there are because of who the president was. And we can't get rid of the Electoral College, so only the big liberal states and big cities elect our president. This is the best example that I could come up with that I've seen in forever why we need to keep the Electoral College.
Well, it's interesting because the discussion that's happening across the nation right now is also getting rid of the filibuster for the same purpose, right? You want to have this strong control of one particular party, and that would be very bad for our nation.
Well, that's true. But the interesting thing on this case is there are several other free exercise cases that they're looking at. And one of those this year could be one of the ones. I mean, Jack Phillips with Masterpiece Cake, Baronel Stutzman with the flower shop, where
and
it's
poor
the
Jack,
it's the
after
LBGT
him again.
community taking on through the government Christians that don't agree with their perspective on sexuality.
Yeah, so talk about Jack for a second. He's back in court this time because he wouldn't bake a cake again for a transgender person.
Okay, so it's not that he wouldn't bake the cake for the person. The cake, well, and you have to look at his website. He doesn't just bake cakes. My wife is a great baker. She bakes cakes and pies and cookies and stuff. He makes these sculptures out of cakes.
It's art.
Okay.
Yes.
But it wasn't that a transgender guy came in and said, hey, it's my birthday. Would you make me a transgender cake? The guy came in and said, hey, I'm making a party celebrating my transition. I want it pink on the inside and blue on the outside to show my gender dysphoria. And Jack Phillips said, I can't make that cake.
You hit the nail on the head because I have friends that are in the gay community, and they said that if they went to a cake baker to do something like that and the cake baker said no, they would happily take their business to somebody else, right? And so there are reasonable people that don't believe that the government should be forcing people to act contrary to their religious beliefs.
Well, and that's the free speech clause, which the Supreme Court gives a lot more respect to than the free exercise clause historically. Although what I'm saying is we are at a sea change right now. Something big is coming for free exercise, which has kind of been a stepchild since 1990.
Well, I think everybody across the nation is waiting with bated breath because so many changes are happening, good and bad, very quickly, right? I mean, we could sit here and have a whole show on the science.
Well, that's true. And for me, the wave that has been cresting and breaking in favor of progressive ideas with LGBT stuff, military stuff, critical race theory and all that, what's happening my visual of that is the Red Sea, the water's parting and the wave is not having its cresting and its movement. And if that's what occurs, we have to remember it's because of the Electoral College.
You're listening to Faith in Politics on K-Light Radio, and you're watching on Kalo TV. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to briefly talk about what's happening across this great state. We'll be right back.
Aloha, this is William Harrison, president of the Christian Legal Society of Hawaii. We're having this amazing event. It's a free webinar. It's going to feature two distinguished professors of law, Jonathan Turley as well as Michael McConnell. They will be speaking about religious freedom and First Amendment rights. We're going to be discussing some amazing cases that are before the U.S. Supreme Court that will affect your religious rights in our state. Please join us for this free event. Register online. We hope to see you there. Mahalo.
Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum. And Hawaii Family Forum has been serving the faith-based community right here in Hawaii since 1998. What we do is we educate them, we motivate them, and then we activate them. So join us at hawaiifamilyforum.org and let's make a difference right here in this beautiful state of Hawaii. Mahalo. Welcome back to Faith in Politics. I'm your host, Eva Andrade, and I'm here with Jim Hochberg. And now let's jump into what is happening across this great nation. And we're going to do it in just a quick minute. So if I talk really fast, would that be okay if I just keep doing this right now? Just doing like someone will do all this stuff and everything we do, right?
I'll buy it.
So let's first talk about Hawaii is now moved into Tier 4. And there's all kinds of confusion out there on what that means, because did you know there was a Tier 5?
Well, and you know, we talked a little bit about the effort that I'm working on with some other people to have our candidates in the next election cycle run for office on, including whatever their other issues are, passing a constitutional amendment strictly limiting the governor's emergency powers. So as we were talking about a little bit with our friend from Florida, we're trying to put together a constitutional amendment that candidates can run for election next year to strictly in the Constitution require the legislature to do something to extend the governor's emergency powers past the 60 days that the statute says is absolute, but the judges wouldn't enforce. And this is why it's necessary. What is this creating a fifth tier? Because they want people to get vaccinated. And I think they're freaking out, because what they did originally is they said, oh, this is great, you can get vaccinated, and all the people that wanted to get vaccinated got vaccinated.
Can I just say that we did a survey, Hawaii Family Forum does, that people made fun of us. This is not a scientific survey, but the percentages are almost spot on.
Yeah. Exactly.
On the people that said they're just not going to do it, or they're waiting, or whatever. I mean, and I know there were several other groups that did surveys right after ours, and it was around the same percentage.
But you know, if you want your government in the United States of America and in the several states, including the state of Hawaii, to be what's called transparent, on COVID, they have not been. What this new fifth tier is telling people, if you want to have everything disappear, go get a vaccination. And if somebody doesn't get vaccinated, that's why you don't have the freedom you had before.
I said that a couple shows ago, that this was going to pit the vaccination people against the anti-vaccination people. And because it's your fault, Jim, that we're not in total freedom. It's your fault because you won't get vaccinated.
Just this week, the CDC has changed the text required of the vaccine givers on that fact sheet that we talked about earlier. Now it has to say that for people in a certain younger age group, they have this chance of getting an enlarged heart, which is a very bad thing. And there are some other things that they're working on, deciding whether they have to add in. That should be part of the discussion, not just if you want to be free, get a vaccine.
And it goes back to what we've talked about every time on this show, is that regardless of the vaccine we're talking about, you got to know what you're agreeing to. And that's the problem. The problem is you agree to something, and then suddenly there's some new science that comes out. And then you think, wow, did I make the right decision? I know, because I know people that have been vaccinated, and they did it willingly. They vaccinated their kids when it was opened up for their kids. And now these same parents are very upset that their young boys may start having some heart issues because of the vaccination, because that was not part of the knowledge they were given before the shot.
But what was not stressed to them, which should have been, is there is no approved COVID vaccine, because none of them are approved.
It's on all the paperwork that everybody signs.
I have a friend that got the paperwork after they got the vaccine. They didn't get the paperwork in a place to read it first.
Yeah, I think that's why people are distrustful now. You know, I don't want to get into a boxing match with people in the medical community. What I want to do is I want to help alleviate some of the fear that's out there. And Jim, the fear is not being alleviated. In fact, every time there's a press release or a news conference on the issue, more fear and more anxiety seems to be instilled in people's minds.
And if you happen to have never heard about this because of where you get your news as a viewer of this show, if you get your news somewhere where you have not heard that Fauci is in big trouble on a lot of different fronts because of what he did publicly versus what he did behind the scenes for the last year and a half, please look it up, because some of the news sources are hiding that info, and the big tech social blah blahs are also hiding that information. And certainly we appreciate our viewers from every source of info, but on this point, they really need to get the good news.
Yeah, you made that point in the last show. We do want to thank Duke Iona and Elwin Ahu for the great Father's Day and their show, Makana and Brendan. Yes, my mind went. I want to thank them because they did a fantastic job on the Father's Day show, and I just love both of them and their hearts. And I know Brendan and McConaughey personally, and they're both great guys. So thanks so much for tuning into that show. And if you haven't, then make sure that you go back and look at it. They did a really good job. It is available on YouTube if you have not seen it. And I want to give a shout out to the mothers for the Mother's Day show as well. So, in fact, go to the playlist at Calo TV, find Faith in Politics, and go back and look at, we had a lot of great shows on YouTube. And check it out, because there's a lot of great shows.
That was actually quite a fabulous one-year anniversary celebration that we enjoyed together with our crew and everybody, friends and stuff.
We did. And so, as usual, we want to thank the crew at Calo TV and Jake from K-Light Radio for all the support and encouragement to just keep going with this show. And for you, the viewers, Jim and I constantly get more and more, and it's growing. And so we want to encourage you, share the show with your friends and let them know that there's some conservative voices right here in the state of Hawaii speaking on behalf of you, the faith-based community. Special shout outs. We want to give a shout out to Sharon Bennett, who actually sent an email to Mansion because Jim asked her to do so. So we thank her for that. Leilani Aki, who always chats with us when the show is airing live. Michael Tata, our friend from the disability community, who is very, very open and honest about some of his struggles. Haradine Ambrose, who actually reached out to Jim. He wanted to get Jim's, Jim was talking about going to download one of these documents. And so he reached out and said, hey, Jim, what is the name of that thing? I want to get it. And so we want to thank him for that.
Which is why I brought it today, too.
Yes. So
from Heritage Foundation.
So we want to encourage you guys to
so we can put maybe that URL on the screen again and people can grab it.
Yes. And if not, send me an email at eva@calotv.com and I can forward that information and get you whatever it is you need, because we want this show to grow, which means we need you to send a check to Calo TV, because unfortunately everything costs money and we can only do so much. So if the Lord is speaking to you right now, get that check in the mail to Calo TV, reach out to them, find out how you can partner to make this happen. And don't forget to listen to all the great programming on K-Light Radio, because you want to be blessed by all the great ministries that are promoted there. The other thing that we want to do is we want to encourage you to stay plugged in to Faith in Politics. Unfortunately, Jim Hochberg is going on vacation for the next 2 weeks, so I'm going to have two very special co-hosts coming up. Next week, we've got Susan Duffy, and we're going to be talking to some of the experts at Gateways to Better Education. We're going to be talking about the responsibility that parents have to find out what their kids are learning in school. Does that sound a little bit familiar? It should, because that's all over right now. So you want to make sure you tune in next week. And the week after that, we've got a special co-host, Ola Souza, and we're going to be talking about the police department and all of the stuff that's happening right here in the state and what you can do to support Hawaii's police officers. So you want to make sure you stay plugged in.
I'll be fishing in Braddock's Bay.
And Jim will not be thinking about faith and politics at all over the next 2 weeks.
I probably will, because fishing, there's not a lot of action.
That's too funny. But we do encourage you to pray for Jim and his beautiful
Yes.
wife, Janet, as they are holo across the mainland. But in the meantime, we really appreciate you taking the time to tune in to Faith and Politics right here on Kalo TV and listening on K-Light Radio. And we're wanting to hear from you on any topic that you think we should be addressing. We're going to be talking about the economy because we had some people come up to us saying we got to talk about how the government spends money. So yes, we heard that. We'll be talking about that. And again, make your donations to kalotv.com and make your donations to K-Light Radio. And we will see you when we come back next week with Susan Duffy, and we'll be talking about what's happening in the state of education.
Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo, everybody.